起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各鞠躬，开班一鞠躬。
Please have a seat.
请坐下。Mess it up a little bit. Go and get more mute.
Okay. Hopefully my audio is coming through okay, and everybody can hear. I'm going to make one more minor adjustment on my end. And that should have us all fixed up. This morning,
You sound good,
I'd like to, beg pardon?
Coming through loud and clear. You sound good.
Wonderful, thank you. All righty. This morning I want to take a little time to talk about the concept of emptiness. It's a concept, to be sure, that I talk with my Taiji students about very frequently. It's an important aspect of Tai Chi training to be able to clear one's mind, to be able to think clearly, see clearly, and be sensitive and aware of one's surroundings and circumstances. But emptiness is also a key concept in the Tao teachings, and for a variety of reasons. And so I wonder why that always pops up when I do that. One of the great mysteries of Adobe Flash. Chapter 11 of the Tao Te Ching, which we go over with some frequency here, says that 30 spokes join in one hub. In its emptiness, there is the function of a vehicle. Mix clay to create a container. In its emptiness, there is the function of a container. Cut open doors and windows to create a room. In its emptiness, there is the function of a room. Therefore, that which exists is used to create benefit, and that which is empty is used to create functionality. Bless you. We read through this verse several times a year, actually, in one capacity or another. But I don't think I've ever really dealt with the topic of emptiness at any kind of a deep level. And there are a couple of ways that one might interpret or choose to read this chapter. And as with so many others, I find the more often I read it, the more often I meditate on it, the more often I encounter the teachings about it, the more my understanding changes. Very, very infrequently do I read a chapter out of the Tao Te Ching or prepare a talk where I don't learn something I didn't know before or discover something that I hadn't really thought of before. You know, when we talk about emptiness, we tend to talk about it in a very ethereal and esoteric kind of a way, as something more attached to metaphysics than practicality, even though we read the teachings on emptiness in terms of physical objects. We tend to think of the world in terms of what we can see and touch. We look at the tangible. We look at describing the appearance of something, or the color, or the style, whether or not it's aesthetically pleasing, how big it is, how much volume it takes up, how valuable it is, what does it cost, the tangible properties of stuff. And because of that perception, very often I think it's too simple for our minds to simply bypass the utilitarian nature of nothing, of emptiness, of the spaces inside of things. You know, even when we're buying a home, probably the single biggest decision that most of us ever make, we tend, first of all, to look at what we call curb appeal. What does the home look like from the outside? How big's the yard? What's the frontage look like? and all of the questions and tangibles that go along with where the house sits on the property and the easements and the various and sundry aspects of how the property is laid out and surveyed and all of those things. We very rarely consider first how the space is going to be used, unless we're dealing with the arrival of a new baby or something like that, where that becomes a more pressing issue. And when we move to the inside of the space, we can visualize the space with all of our stuff in it, but we rarely consider the emptiness that makes that space useful. We think about where the couch is going to go, where the TV is going to go, who's going to get which bedroom and how much stuff's going to fit in it, that sort of thing. We tend to move towards what the eye can see, what we can describe, what we can touch, much more quickly than we do to the intangible attributes of the things around us. Lao Tzu, on the other hand, considers what it is that creates true usefulness. He speaks of the inside of a container, or the space inside the home or a room, the hole in the hub where the wheel attaches to the axle. It is the intangible, the empty part, if you will. It's not just about the stuff. He's not describing what the container looks like, how brightly it's painted, what decorations are on it, how it's put together, or what the home looks from the viewpoint of curb appeal, or what kind of vehicle is being described, whether it's a bicycle, a car, or a wagon. We don't know. What he's describing is the part of all of those things that we cannot see, other than we recognize that there is nothing inside of that space at the moment. And yet it is that emptiness that makes all of those things useful. No one would want a home that was absent its doors and windows. That would make a home an extremely inconvenient thing to try to use. Nobody would want a car without wheels. It would be difficult to drive. No one wants a container that's half full of clay or anything else. It reduces the capacity of the container, let alone one that's full of whatever the material it was made out of. Then it becomes a decoration. And so we can intellectually consider the usefulness of all of these things based on what is not in them. But there's yet another level beyond that, a level that goes past the stuff to the individual that we kind of allude to, but that I speaking for myself, I don't think I've ever really talked about. I speak continually to my students about emptying their minds, achieving a state of what's called no mind, where the mind itself is as still and placid as a mountain lake, reflecting everything around it, and yet holding on to no thoughts at all. It's a meditative state that is not always easy to achieve at first, but in achieving the relaxation necessary to perfect one's Tai Chi, and to be able to be as sensitive and aware as we need to be of what's going on around us, that clarity, that stillness, that emptiness is essential. And we spend a great deal of time working on achieving that state. And I have a whole set of opinions as to why in the West it is apparently so much more difficult to consider emptying the mind that way than in some other Asian cultures with which I'm familiar. Amongst the practitioners of Zen and several different flavors of Buddhism, Emptiness of the mind is a state that's brought about through meditation and recitation of mantras and sutras and other exercises. And it seems to be, over a period of a few years, something that comes almost naturally to these practitioners. It took me a long time to be able to approach a state of no mind, to be able to be relaxed enough and tranquil enough to be as sensitive and aware as I needed to be. You know, we're all born absolutely perfect. We come into this world as unique, radiant spiritual beings. We carry the light of the Tao itself within us when we first open our eyes in this place. But then we're raised by well-meaning and very oftentimes ignorant parents in the ways of the world that surrounds us. And very often, by the time we're 5 or 6 years old, all of the wonderful, mysterious, magical, miraculous things that children perceive has pretty much been squeezed out of them. We learn the ways and beliefs of the world because we are raised by parents, in most cases, who are unaware of any other way to be. And so we fill our hearts and our minds and our existence and our homes and everything that we have with this world that we've been surrounded by. We learn and adopt the beliefs and values and ways of the world that we live in, that we are immersed in. And then we turn right back around and we teach our children the very same things that we learned. And because of that, the cycle of samsara continues, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Now, I'm not here to comment upon whether or not reincarnation exists or not. I'm not in a position to tell any of you that for a fact. I can only tell you what I believe. But it is easy to see the effects of how we grow up in both our lives and the lives of the children around us. My daughter Samantha and my son Aaron have been brought up in a home where the values, traditions, and teachings of the Tao are available and authentic as I can make them. And with all of the help that I can gather from Derek and everyone else that I know, where the truth is valued and emptiness is valued and the souls and minds of the children are valued. And my daughter, Samantha, is perhaps one of the most spiritually astute people I know. There have been multiple stories I've related here about things that she's done, particularly when she was very young, that were remarkable for one who could not possibly have understood the ramifications of paying veneration to the principles that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas stand for on the altar and the shrine. And her sensitivity and awareness of the treatment of animals, right down to the slimiest looking little insect and everything else. She's walked up to my wife before holding bees and wasps in her fingers, and they don't sting her. They don't hurt her in any way, which amazes me because I'm allergic to them, and I tend to shy away from them whenever I get a chance. It is astounding to watch. Of her own volition, about 4 or 5 months ago, she announced that she was going to become a vegetarian and that she couldn't stand the thought of eating meat anymore. Well, that's a move on her part that I applaud, of course, and something that I didn't exert any pressure on her to do. And so the availability of things that are not necessarily of the world can have a huge impact on kind of scooching aside some of the things that we typically fill up our lives with. It is an absolute truth that a heart and mind full of the world cannot be filled with the Tao or anything else. It is also the truth that a cup that is already full cannot be made to hold another drop. If we want to refill the cup, at some point we have to empty it out. If we wish to refill the heart and the mind, first we have to do some unlearning, some emptying out, some house cleaning, if you will. And emptying the heart and mind is kind of that first big step towards returning to our true nature, that nature that is much more aware of the movement and essence of what is the Tao. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm trying to dictate what one should believe from a religious perspective or from a personal perspective. But where we put the energies of our hearts and minds is where our hearts and minds will be filled from. So, for the folks for whom certain other traditions work, I'm very happy that they work for them. For me, I was kind of looking for a different set of answers. And because I started kind of young, I was 13, 14 years old when I first started looking. For me, there was a process of unlearning the things that I had filled myself with. And unlearning those things, emptying my heart and mind, allowed me to open myself up to other possibilities, to other possible answers, to other traditions and values, perhaps, that had better answers for me. I say in this forum all the time that the teachings of the Tao can be tested and the results reproduced by applying the scientific method, that if one follows these teachings in the way that they're taught and learns them and applies them appropriately, that the results are nearly 100% scientifically reproducible. And I say that because I've both experienced it, and over the years I have seen it occur again and again and again in the lives of other people. And so I know it's the truth. This is the only tradition with which I have ever been associated where I could say that. And everyone that I know who falls into the category of reproducing those results has had to go through exactly the same process I had to go through of unlearning what they had grown up with as children or in their formative years, and relearning the way that things really work. And by learning the way that things really work, all of us, to one degree or another, have been able to achieve a higher state of relaxation, of emptiness, of concentrating the energy and understanding the true nature of things and ourselves. The Tao Te Ching says that returning is the very nature of the Tao.
Hey everyone, this is Jared speaking. It looks like...
Uh-oh. Where'd I bottom out?
Yeah, for about 5 seconds or so, Bill, you dropped off, and for everybody, and now you just came back.
Yep, I just got a little notification. My apologies. I don't know what happened there.
Okay, I'm gonna mute my microphone again. Thanks.
Okay. So anyway, to try to recap the last 5 seconds or so, returning to the Tao, or to the true nature, is to approach that oneness. And if you miss something, I'll catch it in questions, I promise. To attain the Tao, for me, is to become enlightened, to become fully awakened. I have had one experience in all the years I've practiced Tai Chi where I believe I caught a glimpse of that oneness. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And if I ever manage to get back there again, I am not coming back here. At the time it occurred the first time, I was completely unprepared. Master Huang never prepared me for the possibility that one might actually achieve a moment of spiritual union like that. And so it scared me so bad I thought I was dead. I thought my heart had just given up, and it blew my whole groove. But when in hindsight, looking back at it, even if I had been dead, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen and the most wonderful thing I'd ever felt. That's why I'm not afraid of dying anymore. And if that's what being enlightened is, I'm here to tell you, that's where we all want to be. Now, talking about all of this emptiness doesn't just apply to uncluttering our mundane, our secular existence. In fact, to understand this chapter at that level is to kind of miss the entire point. But there are things that we can do to help us make that mental and spiritual leap between the mundane and secular and the spiritual, so that we can affect the kind of change we need to in order to achieve that degree of emptiness. It's something that Derek and I both do at least once a year. It's become an annual tradition in my home. And we get rid of the junk and the clutter, the unused, the unneeded, the unnecessary. We find that a good deal of that stuff can find use at Goodwill or some other charity, and so we do that. Some of the stuff is just plain trash and needs to be gotten rid of. I still, for a long time, had a 5 1/4-inch floppy diskettes laying around this house. There hasn't been a computer made that can read one of those in probably 10 years. Why I was hanging on to them, I have no idea. I don't have them anymore. And while we're uncluttering our secular lives, it's important not to think of that process as a loss. Like my poor wife when I get rid of the 120 pairs of shoes she doesn't wear anymore. I took a lot of grief for that one. I find it kind of humorous. She absolutely did not. I tend to think of it as making room. If we can't get rid of what we don't need, we don't have room for what we do need. And so I think of it as clearing out a space for the new, the necessary, the needed, the stuff you have to have, both spiritually and secularly. I try to relate the mundane and the spiritual both during that process, so that there is not only the physical cleaning out of the environment, but also the process of examining the things that I'm doing mentally and spiritually, and getting rid of what doesn't work and reinforcing what does. It's a process of truly letting go, of getting rid of stuff and the attachments to stuff. Heaven knows human beings are pack rats. And not only do we hold on to all kinds of stuff, but we hold on to all kinds of emotions, all kinds of attitudes and feelings, and things like that. And holding on to negative emotions ties us not only to the stuff, but to the world. The attachments we form to people or places or things, those tie us to the world. Our desires and our illusions tie us to this world. And the stress and anxiety and worry that accompany the negative emotions and trying to take care of all the junk can cause us a lot of problems simply because
everyone, this is Derek speaking. It looks like Bill is offline, so I think the reason why we cannot hear him is because he is disconnected from the network. I am trying to get a hold of him by cell phone.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Okay, no luck. I'm going to try a text message, and then we'll switch over to Carmen. Okay, everyone. It looks like we may have lost Bill for good, so I'm going to switch over to Carmen. The timing kind of works out because Bill was slated for a half-hour presentation, so we were supposed to be moving to Carmen at about this time, and I'll circle back to Bill and let him know that we lost connection with him. And let me also mention Bill's presentation as well, because I know he put in a lot of effort in preparing his material to talk about. So unfortunately, he got cut off when his internet connection dropped. And so Bill, just wanted to mention that a lot of people want to hear what you have to say. That talk was going really well, so we're all looking forward to listening to you again next time.